Okay, so this is chapter 12 we're going to cover today. And we've been covering chapters 10 and 11, which I told you are more about bhakti than this one, even though this is called Bhakti Yoga. But this is a really nice chapter. And, I've written about this chapter several times because the way bhakti is denoted here, is described here, is very different from the emotional and the way we do bhakti, how we conceive of bhakti today is very different from that. So it's nice to understand, because like a lot of times you will hear the commentaries on bhakti, right? The bhakti sutras, the navda bhakti, the different bhaktis, in Srimad Bhagavatam, in Ramayana, and so forth. See, those descriptions of bhakti, they are still not they're still not from a shastra. I told you there are three foundations of dharma, right? So Vedas, Brahma Sutras, and Gita. So Gita is the only shastra that has spoken on bhakti. The Narad Bhakti Sutras and all, they're not considered shastra. They are they're poetic forms, and they're from many. There's so many munis, rishis, and all who have written. Even Ramayana is not considered a shastra. The three main, amongst the three main ones. Here, the way bhakti is propounded is the shastra form of bhakti. And before the Gita, the word bhakti you will not find in the Vedas. The Vedas, Upanishads, Brahma Sutras, etc. Before Gita, you will not see that word bhakti. Okay? So if you look at even Vivek Chudamani, all the Vedas, they will only speak of Shraddha, which is faith. And the faith has to be in the technique as well as in the guru, your teacher. So you have to have faith. It talks about faith in this chapter, how, you have to have faith in the unknown, you have to have faith. If you want to attain something, you have to have faith in that. How can you attain something if you don't have faith in it, correct? So Shraddha has always been used. Bhakti has been used for the very first time in the Gita, historically speaking. So in the previous chapter, in chapter 11, we see the cosmic form of Sri Krishna, where he displays the Supreme as the cosmic form, where everything is within that cosmic form, right? So now, when Arjun, in the time of Bhagavad Gita, in the time of Mahabharata, when everybody used to go to a guru and learn, all the Vedas and Upanishads, they always talk of the Supreme as the formless, nameless, unmanifest, and so forth. The consciousness, the Supreme Consciousness, is never spoken of in this way as a cosmic form. So when Arjun sees this cosmic form of the Supreme, he now asks this question in the 12th chapter. He says, what should we have devotion for? Because even in the 11th chapter, Sri Krishna says that you can only see this cosmic form if you have the undivided devotion, if you have the single-pointed devotion for the Supreme. Only then you are qualified to see this cosmic form. So he wants to, once he sees this cosmic form, obviously he wants to experience it on his own. He wants to grow to that level. He wants to evolve to that level where he sees this whole creation as a cosmic form, right? So he's asking, now he's confused now. So he says, do I worship the Supreme as a form, as a cosmic form, or do I worship the Supreme as the formless? Which is better? So this is a very important chapter, because you see, in Sanatan Dharma, we do not demean or condone anything, right? We don't say that, worshipping a form, an idol or whatever is bad, is wrong, is evil, is lower. There's no such thing. It's a very different point of view. It's a very enlightened point of view, in the sense that an enlightened master will always pick you up from wherever you are. You will never be, the way it's approached is very different. There is no stick used. See, why? Let me just take a step back so you understand the bigger context, because it's very important today in the world that we live. Because see, at the time of Gita, Sanatana Dharma was all there is. There was no Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and so forth. But now, how do we understand the Gita in context of today? When Arjuna is saying, do I worship the unmanifest or do I worship the manifest? Like, this idol worship. So, you see, you think of it like an ocean and waves. So many people are not there yet to think of the unmanifest. You will see how in the chapter, you will see what I mean. Most of us are at a level of evolution where we need to think of the ocean as waves. Yeah? Like you look at a person, you relate to a person in a form. When you love your mother, you think of her as a form. Whatever it is, but you look at a photo and you feel something. Or whenever you think of anybody, you think of a form. It is very hard to think of them as the formless. Even they are consciousness. But it's very hard for us to rise to the level of seeing everything and everyone as the formless. Most of us have not evolved to that level. So he asks this, who is the higher and lower? And you see the answer is, there is no higher or lower. Both these paths, whether you worship through the form or the formless, will take you to perfection. Because one will slowly lead to the other as you evolve. So there's no higher or lower, it's just a path. So whatever you can relate to, however you can relate to the Supreme, it's okay. Start there and then you progress to the next step. So, like I said, the Vedas declare the Supreme as nameless, formless. The Supreme is beyond mind, body, intellect, correct? So now he gives the first verse on the ones who want to worship on the form. Okay, so verse number 2, he says, Shri Krishna says that, you see, there are three a person who meets these three sort of characteristics or qualifications can worship the Lord as a form. Okay, so what are these three qualifications or tendencies, or if you have this kind of personality or these kind of qualifications, then yes, you can meditate on the Supreme as a cosmic form, as a Supreme, as like we do for Ishwar. So Ishwar is the first personal form of God. Brahman is beyond anything, right? Brahman you cannot conceive, but Ishwar is the first. What we call God or Allah is equivalent to Ishwar. Beyond that, you can choose whoever you like, but essentially here in the Gita, when Shri Krishna is saying that you can worship the Supreme as a form, he's referring only to Ishwar. He's not referring to Vishnu or Shiv or Mata or any of these other deities, Hanuman or so forth. He's referring to Ishwar. So he says number one is, or he actually, when Shri Krishna showed his cosmic form, that is also of Ishwar. That included Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, if you remember. All the gods, all the devtas, everything was included in that cosmic form. That cosmic form of the Supreme is basically Ishwar. So the three qualifications he says is, the first thing is that the mind has to be merged with the Lord, so that the mind takes on the virtues of the Lord. Now, you see, what happens is whenever you think of somebody, whether it's your Guru or whether it's Sri Krishna himself or Lord Shiv or whoever, whether it's Devi. And here he talks about Ishwar, the cosmic form, which has everything and everyone, all things are included there. Whatever you put your mind onto, what happens is the mind will take on those qualities. You'll feel that, when you meditate on Shiv, your being, your whole mind transforms to the energy of Shiv. When you think of Krishna, your whole mind sort of gets colored with that feeling. That is how the devotional songs are, right? Rang se rang mil jaye means like you get colored with that color of whoever that you meditate upon. You merge into that. The mind will always reflect the qualities of whoever that you meditate on. So when you merge your mind into the Lord, into the Supreme, into Ishwar, the mind will take on the virtues of that. That is why, whatever the virtues are of God, that's why we praise. That's why we have stutis. When you sing and praise, the benefit of that singing is those virtues get kindled in you. That is the whole point of these stutis. So these virtues will get superimposed into your mind. You sort of take on those virtues. That's number one. Number two is that you have the unwavering single-pointed worship or attunement with that higher principle. What does that mean? That means, it is like, when you are in devotion, when you have the single-pointed, unwavering worship, it becomes so intense. Like when you're hearing a bhajan and the pace becomes faster and faster, and you notice how your mind comes to a singularity where no other thought is there except that of whom your mind is focused upon. And your mind becomes razor sharp, single pointed razor sharp. It's almost like, it goes through the eye of a needle. That's how sharp it is. So you can think of your third eye. Your third eye becomes like a razor beam that can go through the tip, to the eye of a needle. That is how single pointed your worship should be, where there should be nothing else. That is kind of like the portal. You go through sort of a vortex. When you become single pointed, your mind pierces through this lower dimensions. You go through this mind. So only then you can transcend the mind. Otherwise, the mind will overshadow. So that unwavering single pointed of worship, where you are completely in attunement with the higher principle, like going through the eye of a needle. That's number two. Number three is unbreakable faith. See, you can only attain, like I said, you can only attain that which you have faith in. You have to have faith that you have a soul, that you have an Atma, that you have to have faith that there is a Supreme. If you don't have that faith, you will never attain it. So you have to have that unbreakable faith in what you want to attain. Okay? So those are the qualifications that he has given for the one who wants to worship on the cosmic form, or the waves, not the ocean. Okay? Now he says, in the next verse, he says that yes, you can also meditate on the change. Now he gives the qualities of the unmanifest, the formless. He says the eternal, the Brahman, is the one that is changeless, indefinable. You cannot define, right? Because as soon as you define something, it gets a boundary. It becomes limited. It's unmanifest. It's omnipresent. It's unthinkable. Because again, if you can think of something, it becomes limited. It is unmovable. Because it's not an object. It's unmovable. It's everything, everywhere. It's unmovable and it's eternal. So these are the qualities of the unmanifest, the formless, nameless, the eternal. And to meditate on the unmanifest, you have to have the following attainments. See, it's easy to say that, we should not worship idols, you should only worship the unmanifest. But have you attained this in your evolution to be able to do it? So, what are those attainments? Number one is restraining all senses. Now, there itself, most of us have not been able to restrain all senses. Okay, most of us do get pulled into our whatever senses we have, but we are extrovertish in our existence, right? So, complete control or restraint over the senses where all your energy will flow inward. There would be no outward flow of that energy. So you can completely withdraw from all your senses. It's a very high attainment of yoga where you can restrain completely within yourself. The second is remaining equanimous in all situations. Okay? What does that mean? Now, whether you have health or sickness, or whether you have wealth or poverty, whether you lose a family member, whether you have a child, whether no matter what happens in life, somebody insults you, somebody praises you, you have complete dispassion. Complete dispassion. There is no emotion involved in it. In no matter what situation comes to you. Again, that's a very high state of yoga. Very few people have attained this. I haven't. I mean, I still get affected if something happens to my son or my mother or whatever. It's easy to not be affected by people you don't know. Even you can not be affected by things at work. But when it comes to your real loved ones, children or parents, it's very hard to say, "Oh, I remain equanimous." It's an achievement that takes years and years and years of practice to go to a state where you still do everything, you still love them, you still serve them, you still behave normal. I mean, it's not like you run away and you leave the world and your family, but you don't get emotionally affected. You don't get involved in it. You slowly understand where there's complete compassion and complete dispassion. It's a very difficult state to attain. And the third requirement, for or evolutionary level for you to meditate on the unmanifest is remaining intent on the welfare of all beings. Means it's become your nature. It's become your nature that you are concerned about the welfare of all beings. You don't leave out anybody in this world. It doesn't matter if it's somebody who hates you or loves you, or somebody you know or you don't know, you're related to, you're not related to. It's the entire, not just human race, but all beings, whether it's animal or human or whatever, that has become your nature. So that is complete unconditional love for everybody. So you've restrained all your senses, you have complete dispassion, and you have complete compassion unconditionally. So that is the requirements. And the fourth one that he mentions in the following verse is that you have detachment from the body and the material world. Because unless and until you are not detached, meaning you're not seeking results, or you're not attached to results, or you're not attached to what you have, what you don't have, and even people and relationships and so forth. Unless you have this detachment from the body and the material world, you cannot be attached to the unmanifest. So it's a detaching from the material and attaching to the immaterial, the unmanifest, right? So if you don't have these requirements, if you have not requirements, but if you have not evolved, see, it happens naturally. It's not something forced. If you follow your natural path of finally attaining the supreme, you you will naturally progress through these stages. It's just that these are mentioned here. So you will naturally go from meditating on a form to meditating on the formless as you evolve. So it's just saying that if you have not reached this evolutionary level, first you you will renounce your body identity, your personality, by meditating on the Lord. Because what happens is you first renounce your own identity and personality and separation by when you meditate on and focus on the Lord, Ishwar. Then what happens is your personality will merge into that Supreme, into that Lord. Okay, so that is first step that you do. Is first you have to let go of that personality, that separation, that ego. So surrendering of your mind, surrendering of your, like I said, the merging your mind with the Lord, the unwavering single pointed worship, the unbreakable faith. When you do that, you are renouncing your ego. You are surrendering your ego to the Lord. So he says, for this you need Ananya Bhakti. Now you must have heard that, this is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, and you'll find the verse, I think it's verse number 7, which talks about the Ananya Bhakti. A single goal, which is nothing else but that goal, when you see no other. There is no other except that one, unwavering, undivided. It's complete. There's no doubt. It brings this unity in the mind when when it's not divided. The mind should not be divided. That Ananya Bhakti will lead you into that merger, so that you have the single pointed goal. Okay. Verse number 8 will talk about surrendering the mind and intellect into the Lord, and it takes on the spirit of the Supreme. This is what I mentioned to you, right? So you surrender your ego, your mind, your intellect into the Lord, and when you do that, then you take on the spirit. That Supreme Spirit will descend into you, which is you already. But what I'm saying is, unless you let go of the limited, the unlimited cannot come to you, because you're already full of a very limited identity. You're functioning from a very solid, very it's like an experience in meditation. When you empty your mind, you will feel, only when you empty the mind will you feel the presence of spirit, right? So this is what it's saying, that you surrender your mind and intellect, only then you will feel or experience that spirit of the Supreme, that you will feel that presence, you will feel that descending into you. And 9 talks about control and observe the wandering mind using the intellect. Now see what it says is, one second, this is where it is the ladder. Just one second, hold on, I have to explain this to you. So verse number 7 is Ananya Bhakti, and let me just read verse number 8. I was going to do these verses because this chapter only has 20 verses, and I wanted to go verse by verse for this chapter. Okay, so okay, so here is where the ladder of bhakti will start. Okay, just give me a second. Made these notes. Yeah, so from here till verse number 11, there is the first 6-7 verses is talking about how you meditate on the Lord and what requirements you have and so forth, and this single pointed Ananya Bhakti. Now from verse number 8, you'll see the verse number 8 is about surrendering the mind and intellect into the Lord. Number 9 is control and observing the wandering mind using the intellect. So supposing, you cannot have this undivided mind, your mind wanders, you're unable to have this concentration, the single pointedness, the unbreakable unbreakable force that you have, that comes with practice. Is a lot of times our mind cannot get there. A lot of times our mind is wandering, correct? We can't get it to that single pointed focus, this concentration and all. So what he says is, he says it's okay if you are not there yet, if your mind wanders, it's all right. You first control and observe that mind, but you use your intellect. Okay, so in our levels of existence, above the mind is the intellect. Now if the mind has a lot of thoughts and it wanders, the way that you bring the mind under control is using the intellect, because it's the intellect that rules the mind, it oversees the mind. So using your intellect, using your observance, what you do is you use your intellect and you bring your mind to a single pointed concentration. This is the method that is prescribed in the Gita. Okay, so whichever other method you do for that, it is fine, it doesn't matter. But this is what he says, that you control and observe. You observe the mind using the intellect. So when you observe the mind, you can bring it under control by using the intellect, because it is your will, it is under your will. So you can think of the intellect as your will, or your choices that you make. You're choosing to still the mind. So using that will, using that intellect, using your willpower, or whatever you want to call it, but it's the overruling power of your mind that can control your thoughts. Okay, so if your mind is wandering first, and then you have to do it again and again. So see, an agitated mind cannot meditate, right? So that's verse number 10. It talks about the agitated mind. The agitated mind cannot meditate. So surrender. So he says, okay, if you have a person who is very rajasic, very a person who cannot even sit down and meditate, they're very external oriented, they want to do seva, or they can do actions, but you tell them to sit down and meditate, their mind is all over the place, and they're not attuned to their using their intellect to overpower or control their mind. They're not attuned there yet, because it's just too much. It's too much activity in the mind. In that sense, for these kind of people, for the agitated mind who can't meditate, it's okay. He says, first you dedicate all your actions to the Lord. Surrender and dedicate all actions to the Lord. Okay. So now you see this ladder, right? So he starts with the highest, surrendering yourself, merging with the Lord. Your personality will drop. You'll take on the personality of the Lord. Have that ananya bhakti. And if you can't do that, if your mind wanders, then first bring the mind under the control of the intellect. So that's one rung under the ladder, one rung under. Then one rung under that is that, okay, so if you can't even meditate, you can't even get your intellect to overpower the mind, it's okay. First you start with surrendering and dedicating all actions to the Lord. So this is people who have a lot of vasanas, there's a lot of rust or build-up, like when you have a brass or a silver vessel. Now if there is a lot of pile-up, you first need to clean the outer layers. You need to first come to a little bit of refinement. When there's a lot of crud, you need to first remove that. So these people who have a lot of vasanas that are driving their behaviors, that are overpowering their mind, they cannot get the mind under control. He says it's okay, surrender and dedicate all your actions to the Lord. So what does that do? It removes the vasanas, it sort of reprograms you, because you're not doing it for yourself. It's not ego driven, they're not selfish. You say, I will start by dedicating whatever I do, I'm doing for the Lord. I'm doing it for the Lord. So when you surrender your actions to the Lord, then you move away from your own desire oriented actions, selfish actions, and so forth, that will reprogram your mind a little bit. It will remove some of these vasanas. The mind will not be driven by so many desires, and slowly it will come to a state where now you can bring it more under control using your intellect. Now, if you can't even do that, right, you're not at the point where you cannot be selfless, you cannot dedicate your actions. He's saying that, okay, so those are the people who have a lot of rajas and tamas. They can't dedicate, right? They can't subdue the ego. The egos are very prominent. Then he says that it's okay. Then what you do is you do the actions for yourself. That's fine, but at least surrender. Don't have attachment to the results. So what he's trying to say here is, at least if you cannot dedicate and dedicate your actions to me, surrender the anxiety and fear that you have of the future. Bring your mind to the present. So, like a lot of times where the Gita talks about this, the phal, phal ki chinta, that it doesn't mean simply that you do not worry about the results. It means drop the worry, drop the anxiety, drop the fear. So rather than being more future focused or past focused, bring your mind to the present. So do your actions 100%. Do your actions even if you want to do it for yourself. It's okay. But at least drop the anxiety and fear. So you're doing something 100% and you are not worried about the future. You're not worried about will it bear fruit, will it be successful, will it be unsuccessful, what will happen, I'm doing my best, what's going to happen, what's the outcome going to be. So he says, just don't worry, you just do your 100% and drop the worry for the future. That way you are completely in the present. So the mind will become to the present, right? Now in the 12th verse it summarizes all of these things that it's talked about, which is about the meditation on the form, okay, the not any form. It doesn't have to be an idol, but it could be. It's called idol worship now, but it could be anything. It could you just simply be, you close your eyes and you think of some supreme Ishwar, any form you choose, anything you want. But here when you're meditating on Ishwar and it says, okay, when you can't do this, then do this. If you can't do this, then do this, and so forth. So the 12th verse will summarize it. Now if you read the 12th verse, you'll be completely confused what it's saying, because the way it's worded is very backwards. It's a little tricky. So I'll just say it in a simplified manner. So what it is saying is that meditation is the highest. Okay, meditation is the highest form. Second comes knowledge. Okay, so meditation is higher than knowledge. Knowledge is higher than practice. I forgot one step. There's a practice here somewhere. Where is this? Abhyas. One second. There's a verse on Abhyas. Where did it go? So verse number 10. How did I figure that? I can surrender and dedicate all actions to the Lord. Concentrate for all. 9. Chapter, verse number 9. If you are unable to fix your mind, so verse number 9.
Verse number 9.
Yeah, I don't know, how did I miss? Because I took notes. Control and observe the wandering mind using the intellect through practice, I should say. So verse number 9 is you control and observe the wandering mind.
Verse number 9, yeah.
With practice, yeah. Okay, so it's with practice, right? So the verse number 9 is you fix your mind steadily upon me by the yoga of practice, seeking to reach me. But this is basically yoga of practice. I mean, I just want to make notes for myself, but what I told you again is, what is this practice? Practice is basically the mind will wander away, and the way to bring yourself back is by observing the mind using the intellect. That is the practice. So you sit for meditation, your mind wanders away. Then using the intellect, you bring it back. Then it go away again. Then using the intellect, you bring it back again. This is the way it is taught in the Gita, in this chapter. Other people have other methods, like you drop a mantra, whatever form that you have. Some people want to just observe the breath. Whatever method you have to bring that wandering mind back to the present. Any method you want to use is fine, but here it talks about the practice that it's referring to is using the intellect to control and observe the wandering mind. Okay, so back to verse number 12. So it says meditation is higher than knowledge. Knowledge is higher than practice. Practice of bringing your mind back to the present. Now it says that losing the entire, losing the anxieties and fears, falachinta, it says that is even higher than meditation. This is where it gets confusing. So what it's trying to say here, what Vedvyas is trying to say here is, when you sit for meditation, the very first requirement is that your mind has to be in the present moment. That is what it means. So that is the number one thing that you have to start with. So the mind, if you can bring the mind to the present moment, that is a requirement for meditation. Yes, of course, meditation is higher than knowledge, knowledge is higher than practice. Okay? And when this happens, then peace immediately follows. Okay, so what this means is that when you follow this path of renunciation of the mind, renunciation of the intellect, then peace is you're definitely going to attain peace. Now we have noticed this, right? We have noticed this when we meditate, even if we don't meditate, if we surrender our anxieties, our fears, we attain a peace of mind, right? So all of these things that it's talking about here is finally to attain peace of mind. That's what it's talking about in verse number 12. Whether it's through meditation or knowledge or practice or not being worried about the future, having anxieties and fear, then this whole path that has been given to you is finally going to lead to peace of mind through renunciation. What are you renouncing? You're renouncing the mind. Okay. So first, tell me if you understand so far. So far we have covered the meditation on, most of it is, except for one verse, two verses, most of this till now, till verse number 12, is about how to have bhakti on the form. So it talks about the 3 qualifications that you have to have. Then it said, okay, if you meet these qualifications, you can meditate on the cosmic form. If you can't do this, then practice. If you can't practice, then surrender your actions. If you can't surrender your actions, then at least drop the fear of the future, anxieties of the future. Okay? So any questions still here? It's very important you understand this ladder of bhakti before we proceed. Okay, so that's simple. Now from verse number 13, these are enumerating all the virtues that you have attained, where you can now meditate on the formless. So this is the start of the list of virtues, and as we go through the following chapters, 14, 15 and so forth, many virtues will be enumerated. See, when these virtues are listed here, it is simply saying that a person who has attained these virtues, that person is a living example of somebody who will be successful, who can even achieve meditating on the unmanifest. You see, just think about it. You want to meditate, and there is absolute, it's absolute oneness that you're meditating. Not even oneness, it's a very abstract thing that you're meditating upon, right? It is not it's not a being, it's not the universe even. It is nothing that you can conceive of. It is nothing that you can, which is beyond your mind and intellect. To transcend that duality to oneness, to transcend that duality, you have to achieve a very high level of evolution. And as you evolve, these virtues also come with it, you know. So the main thing Gita is trying to tell you is, it is not that an evolution, a spiritual evolution, is separate from the evolution of you as a human being. You becoming a better human being is part and parcel of spiritual evolution. So, you know, a lot of people have been meditating for years and they transcend the mind and da 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 da, whatever. But you see, there is no point if you have not also become a good human being. So in this starting from this chapter, it is showing how evolution into knowledge of yourself, self knowledge, you know, knowledge of your own self, the experience of your own self, going to a very high level of evolution spiritually, comes hand in hand with the blossoming of virtues. Then that evolution is natural. It is natural. It's like, you know how the when the fruit ripens, it becomes sweet. So the person blossoms, you know, the person attains these virtues naturally as the person ripens. So it's not just inner evolution, it's the evolution as a human being. So it's describing this person who has gone from meditating on the form to being able to meditate on the formless, nameless, unmanifest, beyond mind, intellect, has transcended duality, can actually completely transcend, you know, and be in that state of oneness. That person has also displays these qualities. You see, till verse number 12, it was describing people who will meditate on the form. Okay? If they can't do this, they do this. If they can't do this, they do this. So that is that. Now it's talking about the second phase, when you have gone beyond, you have merged into the Ishwar, you have merged into the cosmic form, you have merged your personality into that cosmic form, you have renounced your personality, your ego, your mind, your intellect. Now you can go from there to beyond that, beyond anything imaginable. Okay, so you can read these, you know, well, we can do it quickly. From verse number 13, you know, it enumerates all these virtues. It's you should definitely read that. Okay, so see, here are the virtues. He who hates no creature. Okay, he who hates no creature, who is friendly and compassionate to all, and who is free from attachment and egoism, who is balanced in pleasure and pain, and forgiving. And then 14 is ever content, steady in meditation, self-controlled, possessed of firm conviction, with mind and intellect dedicated to me. He, my devotee, is very dear to me, and I am dear to him. But so he is describing basically all these virtues. Now 15 is he by whom the world is not agitated or affected. So the world is not agitated by his presence, his thoughts, his words, his deed, and who is not agitated by the world, who is free from joy, envy, fear, and anxiety, he is dear to me. And then 16 is he who has no expectations, who is pure, alert. Alert here means awareness, who's always in awareness, awareness consciousness, unconcerned, untroubled, and who has renounced all undertakings. So renounce all undertakings, don't, this can be misunderstood, okay? It's not like that you don't do anything. It's basically that you're not attached to them. You do it as a non-doer. My devotee is very dear to me. You can read the commentary, because some of these virtues, you can't take them literally. You have to get the subtle meaning. He who neither rejoices nor hates, nor grieves nor desires, he who has renounced good and evil, full of devotion, he is dear to me. And he who is the same to friend and foe in honor and dishonor, he who is the same in cold and heat, pleasure and pain, who is free from attachment. So it's talking about how your ego is not hurt, your intellect is not swayed, your emotions are not affected, your mind is not, affected, and your body is not affected by cold and heat. So all these complementary values, they are talking about the different layers of existence. That's why it's listed like this. Okay, then 19 is to whom criticism and praise are equal. Okay, so here criticism and praise, again, it's to your intellect and ego that you're not affected. Who is silent and content with anything, who considers no place as home. Again, this doesn't mean somebody homeless, but the whole world has become your home. It's not that you're attached to one home. You're not that's what it really means, that you feel at home no matter where you are. Who is steady minded and full of devotion, that person is very dear to me. So here, and then the last verse is, they indeed who follow this immortal dharma. Now here you see it says dharma, okay, and it's very interesting because I've been I've been talking about dharma separately, but it's interesting, it's coincidence that now this dharma word has come here. The Sanatan dharma, immortal dharma, is described above. Okay, so what does this mean? See, dharma is also righteousness, and that includes all these beautiful virtues that have been described above. So all of these things, that these virtues, you can make a list of them. See, because one of the reasons why we have this guidance in our life of Shastra is to be a guide for what is moral and immoral, right? They are a guide to society as to what we should choose and what we should reject, what is beneficial, what is not beneficial. So as a guide, Gita tells you this is what composes of being a good human being. So we keep saying, be a good human being, be a good human being, but what values, what human values, what virtues defines a good human being, right? We know it intuitively. We kind of assume, you love everybody, you don't harm anybody, etc. But here it enumerates it there's a lot of thought that's gone into selecting these virtues. They're also progressive, they're complementary, there's a lot to it, but basically these are enumerations of virtues of a good human being. So endowed with faith regarding me as a supreme goal, such devotees are exceedingly dear to me. So this concludes the 12th chapter, which defines what bhakti really is. It's very different from what you may think bhakti is, but this is how bhakti defines how you actually merge into the supreme and you become the supreme. So that is what bhakti truly is. It's not an emotional outpouring or such. It's this unconditional love, that you become this unconditional love. So if you have any questions, we can talk about it. But you see here how much meditation is mentioned, right? Meditation is the highest form of devotion. So you won't see that in, if you read Navda Bhakti or any of the, even in Narad Bhakti Sutras, only the final form, the final where it says, you treat your beloved as a friend, as a lover, as this, as a child, and so forth. And only the last form of bhakti is said, you become one with him. That is sort of what this chapter is talking about, is that you merge into that Lord, you merge into the Supreme. that is the essential definition of bhakti, because you have to go from duality to oneness. Otherwise, bhakti, see, when you talk of bhakti, you suppose that bhakti is towards something or someone, right? So it's assumed that there is duality. You start with duality, but you ascend to oneness. So long ago, when I was reading, or I was attending a session on, I think it was Narad Bhakti Sutras, I don't remember, with a senior teacher, Joan Goodrum, and I said, but bhakti can't be duality. Bhakti has to be oneness. Do you become unconditional love? That was my question. Do you become unconditional love? But I got my answer. I mean, basically, it is the attainment of unconditional love is bhakti. Any comments, comparisons with anything else? So, what would be nice is if you look at this chapter and you see, okay, where am I at? Where am I at in this ladder that is described here? And am I at the point where I can ascend from worshipping the form to the meditation on the formless? Are you there, or where are you at? Where are you at in your evolution? So the whole ladder of evolution is described here, right? Because what you want to aim to do is you want to get to the next rung. You want to move to the next step, the next level of evolution, right? So you see where you're at. This is how it can be helpful. You see, okay, I am here, I have maybe 60% or 80% of this, but this is what I need to attain. And when you have that faith, when you make that intention, when you have that faith, you will attain it. There's no way you will not. Okay? Make sense? No questions? It's nice. Either I was very confusing or it was too easy. So you'll remember this ladder of bhakti, right? You'll read the chapter, or you can hear this recording. And actually I've written on it. I don't know if it's online, but it's in both my books, I think, first and second book. This ladder of bhakti is there. But it's good to read this. It's only 20 verses. Read this chapter, read these 20 verses, and if there is a verse or a word or a term that you don't understand, just read the commentary portion of that. Most of it is obvious, but some of it, a lot of this is implied meaning. So if you need to know the implied meaning, you'll have to read the commentary. Yeah? So we will close, unless there are questions, we'll close till we meet on Sunday at 11. And we can meditate. And the next chapter is very heavy. It's transitioning into knowledge. I'm not sure if we can do it in one session. We'll try. It's now, you're going into the Upanishadic, portion of the Gita. The field and the knower of the field is the next chapter. It is rather abstract some places, so we'll see how it goes. So we've completed 2 sections of the Gita. The first 6 chapters was about you. The next 6 chapters that we completed now, this was about Tat, the God or Ishwar. And the next 6 chapters about the oneness, the knowledge, right? The oneness of the self and supreme. Okay.